Hey there. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to share something that happened to me last year. Something I still can't quite explain. It began with an email. For months, I'd been hunting for a countryside retreat, someplace peaceful where I could work on my next book. The real estate market was absolutely brutal. Any decent property either got snapped up instantly or was listed far beyond what I could afford. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a notification popped up about a new listing. Historic Victorian home, price to sell, immediate possession available. A 5-bedroom Victorian sitting on 10 acres. The price seemed suspiciously low for something like that. The listing had only been live for 20 minutes, when I called the agent. A woman with a crisp, professional voice answered. When I mentioned wanting to view the property, there was this brief pause before she said, "The Maddox estate is a unique opportunity, but I should mention it's being sold as is, and the family is eager to close quickly." I asked why. "The last family member recently passed," she explained. "The heirs live overseas and have no interest in keeping up the property." It sounded perfect. Maybe too perfect. I scheduled a viewing for the following day. The house sat about 2 hours outside the city, tucked in a valley that felt frozen in time. Driving down the long gravel driveway, the trees eventually parted to reveal this grand Victorian that looked like it belonged on some Gothic novel cover. 3 stories of weathered elegance with a wraparound porch and intricate woodwork you just don't find anymore. The real estate agent was already waiting. A slender woman in her 50s with silver, streaked hair pulled tightly back. She introduced herself as Margaret Keller. As we approached the house, I noticed she kept a careful distance, standing at the driveway's edge while motioning for me to go ahead up the steps. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked. She offered a tight smile. "I've shown it 3 times this week. I know the layout well enough to guide you from here, if you don't mind. I've got a bit of a cold and would rather stay in the fresh air." Odd, but I didn't question it. Truthfully, the chance to explore alone appealed to me. The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Old wood, dust, and something else. Something earthy, almost sweet, like overripe fruit. The foyer opened into a grand hallway with a sweeping staircase. To the right sat what must have been a parlor. To the left, a formal dining room. Both stood mostly empty, except for a few heavy antique pieces draped in yellowed sheets. Following Margaret's directions from outside, I made my way through the first floor. The kitchen with its ancient cast iron stove, a library with built-in shelves stripped of books, and a sunroom overlooking what was once probably a garden, now overtaken by weeds and wild roses. Upstairs, 5 bedrooms awaited, each with high ceilings and large windows. The master bedroom still contained a massive 4-poster bed, the only furniture not covered or removed. The 3rd floor held 2 smaller rooms, likely servants' quarters, plus access to an attic I didn't explore. Throughout the tour, excitement kept building. Yes, the place needed work, lots of it, but the bones were solid. The structure felt sound, and more importantly, something about it just felt right. I could already picture myself writing at a desk beside one of those tall windows, watching seasons shift across the valley. When I came back outside, Margaret was on her phone, but quickly ended the call upon seeing me. "Well?" she asked, still keeping her distance from the house. "I'll take it," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. Something flickered across her face. Relief, concern. But it vanished so fast I wondered if I'd imagined it. "The Maddox heirs will be pleased," she said. "They're very motivated sellers. In fact, if you can close quickly, say within a week, I believe they'd accept an offer below asking price." Strange. Everything about this transaction felt rushed, like the family couldn't unload the property fast enough. But I was too excited about owning such a magnificent home at such a bargain to dig too deep. The closing went remarkably smoothly. I never met any Maddox heirs. Everything went through their attorney, a nervous man named Philip Jenkins, who kept checking his watch constantly. When I asked about the property's history, hoping for some interesting anecdotes, he shuffled papers and muttered something about the family owning it for generations before quickly changing the subject. The only unusual moment came during the final paperwork when Jenkins slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Standard procedure," he said without meeting my eyes. "The family values privacy. They simply request you don't publicize any personal items or family documents you might find on the property." Odd, but not unreasonable. I signed. 2 weeks later, I moved in. The first few days were consumed with unpacking and arranging furniture. I set up my writing space in the library, bringing in a massive oak desk I'd found at an antique store. The house had no internet yet, and cell service was spotty at best, something I actually found refreshing. This was exactly why I'd moved to the country. To disconnect, to focus on writing without modern life's constant distractions. On my 4th night, I had my first strange experience. I was in bed reading when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the 3rd floor, directly above my bedroom. Slow, deliberate steps crossing from one end of the attic to the other, then stopping. I froze, book in hand, listening. Old houses settle and creak constantly, but these were unmistakably footsteps. Grabbing my phone for its flashlight, I headed upstairs. The steps to the 3rd floor were narrow and steep, designed for servants meant to remain unseen and unheard. At the top sat a small landing with doors to what were once servants' bedrooms, and a pull-down ladder leading to the attic. The attic ladder was down. I was certain I hadn't left it that way. In fact, I hadn't been up there at all since moving in. "Hello," I called, shining my light upward into darkness. "Is someone there?" No response, but the silence felt heavy, expectant. Heart pounding, I climbed the ladder slowly. The attic was a large, open space with sloped ceilings and small round windows at either end. My flashlight cut through darkness, illuminating piles of old furniture, trunks, and boxes. No one was there, of course. Just decades of forgotten possessions gathering dust. As I turned to leave, my light caught something on the far wall. A door I hadn't noticed before, partially hidden behind stacked picture frames. It looked different from other doors in the house. Newer somehow, with a heavy padlock securing it. I made a mental note to find a way to open it, then headed back downstairs, attributing the footsteps to house settling or imagination working overtime in an unfamiliar space. The next morning, I decided to properly explore the grounds. The 10 acres included dense woods north and east, open meadows south, and a small overgrown orchard west. Behind the house sat what was once a formal garden, now wild and untamed, but still showing ghost of its original design through stone paths and weathered statues. Walking the property perimeter, I noticed something odd about the northern tree line. A gap, almost like a path leading deeper into the woods. Curious, I followed it. The path, if you could call it that, was barely visible, just a slightly clearer route through underbrush. After about 10 minutes walking, I reached a clearing. In its center stood a stone structure resembling a small mausoleum or crypt, entrance blocked by a rusted iron gate. Above the gate, weathered but still legible, Maddox, 1887. The family plot. I peered through the gate, but could see little in the darkness beyond. Another mental note: return with a better flashlight and maybe tools to open that gate. Turning back toward the house, I noticed something half buried in leaves near my feet. Bending down, I brushed debris away to reveal a small tarnished silver object. A pocket watch, ancient and no longer working, with elaborate engravings on its case. Prying it open revealed an inscription, "To E.M. Some debts can never be paid. Some secrets must remain buried. SWL. E.M. would be a Maddox, presumably. But who was SWL? And what debt? What secret?" I pocketed the watch and headed back to the house, mind buzzing with questions. That afternoon, I decided to tackle the locked attic door. Finding a toolbox in the garden shed, I brought it upstairs. The padlock was old and rusted. After some effort with bolt cutters, it gave way with a satisfying snap. The door opened into a small room, more a large closet, really, lined with shelves. And on those shelves sat dozens of leather-bound journals arranged chronologically from 1887 to 1972. I took the earliest one, dated 1887, and opened it carefully. The paper was brittle but intact, handwriting elegant and flowing. It belonged to Edmund Maddox, the original owner. Over the next few hours, I lost myself in Edmund's world. He'd built the house for his young wife Lillian and infant son Thomas. A successful businessman who'd made his fortune in coal mining and railway investments. The journal detailed construction, business dealings, and evident adoration for his family. But as I continued reading, the tone shifted. Entries grew shorter, more cryptic. References to the arrangement and or obligation appeared. By late 1887, Edmund wrote about disturbances in the house and Lillian's deteriorating health. The final entry that year, dated December 21st, 1887, reads simply, "It is done. God forgive us." I reached for the next journal, dated 1888, but before opening it, a loud crash came from downstairs. Setting the journal aside, I hurried down to investigate. In the kitchen, I found a cabinet door, hanging open with a broken dish on the floor. I'd have attributed it to improper closing. But something else caught my eye. A small muddy footprint on the otherwise clean tile floor. It looked like a child's footprint. I lived alone. No children in this house. I checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Found nothing. No intruder, no other footprints, no explanation for that single muddy impression in my kitchen. That night, sleep wouldn't come easily. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified, significant. Around 3 a.m., I startled awake at what sounded like a child's laughter. Distant but clear, coming from somewhere outside. Getting up, I looked out the window. Moonlight illuminated the overgrown garden and woods beyond. No one was there, but as I turned away, movement caught my eye. A small figure darting between trees at the forest edge. I threw on clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and headed outside. The night was cool and still, only crickets chirping and leaves rustling softly in the breeze. Moving toward the woods, I swept my flashlight across the tree line. "Hello," I called. "Is someone there?" My voice sounded small in the vast night. No response. No movement. No sign of the figure I'd seen. As I turned back, my flashlight beam caught something white near the wood's edge. Moving closer revealed a small wooden cross, painted white but now peeling and weathered. About 2 feet high. Driven into the ground at the very tree line. Kneeling to examine it revealed no name, no date. Nothing to indicate who might be buried there, if anyone. But shining my light around the area, I spotted another cross about 20 feet away. And beyond that, another. I counted 7 crosses altogether, arranged roughly along the boundary between cleared land and forest. All identical. Small, white, anonymous, all looking very old. A chill ran through me, unrelated to the night air. I hurried back to the house, locking the door behind me. The next day, I returned to the attic and journals. Hours passed as I read through them, piecing together Maddox's family history and the house that had become my home. The emerging story was fragmented, told across generations of Maddox patriarchs. But a pattern became clear. Every few decades, the same phrases appeared: the arrangement, or obligation, the price we pay. In 1921, Thomas Maddox, Edmund's son, wrote, "Father never spoke of the arrangement, but he made sure I understood my responsibilities before he passed. Now it falls to me to maintain what he started. The payments have been made. The boundary remains intact." In 1943, William Maddox wrote, "We received a letter from Langford today. The usual arrangement continues, but the price has increased. Such inflation, even in matters such as these. Father would be appalled, but what choice do we have?" Langford, SWL from the pocket watch. It seemed likely. The most recent journals came from the 1960s and early 1970s, kept by Richard Maddox, apparently the last family member living in the house. His entries grew increasingly erratic and paranoid over time. October 14, 1971. "The payments are no longer sufficient. It wants more, always more. Last night, I heard scratching at the windows. All through the house, even on the third floor. How is that possible?" December 21, 1971. Anniversary of the original sin, 84 years. The boundary weakens. "I've reinforced the crosses, but it may not be enough. I don't know what more I can do." March 3, 1972. Langford's descendant called today. They're washing their hands of it. Centuries of obligation, and now they simply walk away. "Family business dissolved," they said. "Final payment enclosed," as if money was ever the real currency in this exchange. The final entry, dated April 17, 1972, contained just 4 words: "God help us all." After that, nothing. According to property records from my purchase, the house had remained in the Maddox family, but stood vacant since 1972. Richard Maddox had moved to Arizona, dying in 1980. The property passed to his daughter, who never lived in it, then to her children, the overseas heirs who sold it to me. For 50 years, the house had stood empty, waiting. That night, the noises worsened. Footsteps ran up and down stairs. Doors opened and closed on their own. Twice I got up to investigate, but found nothing. Around midnight, I heard a child crying. A heartbreaking, mournful sound seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I decided I needed to learn more about the Maddox family and this mysterious Langford. Driving into town, I hoped the local library might hold historical records or newspapers, shedding light on the situation. The town was small. Just a few storefront blocks surrounding a central square with the obligatory Civil War general statue. The library was a Carnegie building, grand but modest, with an elderly librarian who perked up considerably when I mentioned the Maddox house. "Oh my," she said, eyes widening behind thick glasses. "You're living out there all alone." When I confirmed this, she pressed her lips together, then said, "You might want to speak with Dr. Harrison. He's our local historian. Knows all the old stories. His office is just across the square, the red brick building with green shutters." Dr. Harrison turned out to be a retired history professor in his 70s with a wild mane of white hair and suspenders holding up corduroy pants. His office overflowed with books, maps, and artifacts relating to local history. When I told him where I was living, his bushy eyebrows shot up. "The Maddox place, well. Didn't think anyone would ever live there again. Sit down, young man. I believe we have much to discuss." Over the next hour, Dr. Harrison filled in some gaps. The Maddox family had been prominent regionally since before the Civil War, with interests in coal mining, timber, and later manufacturing. Edmund Maddox, who bidment my house, had been especially successful but also controversial. There were rumors, Dr. Harrison said, lowering his voice as if sharing scandalous secrets, that Edmund made his fortune through less than honest means. Some said he'd made a deal with the devil himself. Superstitious nonsense, of course, but the rumors persisted. "What about the Langford family?" I asked. The journals mentioned them repeatedly. Dr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. The Langfords. Now that's interesting. They weren't from around here originally. Samuel Langford arrived sometime in the 1880s and set up a law practice. His firm handled Maddox family legal affairs for generations, closed up shop in the early 70s, if I recall correctly. This aligned with what I'd read, but still didn't explain the arrangement's nature or what the Maddox family had been paying for all those years. Dr. Harrison, I said carefully, the property has some unusual features. Small crosses along the wood's edge and a family crypt deeper in the forest. Do you know anything about those? The old man's face grew serious. There was a tragedy back when the house was first built. The details are sketchy, but from what I've pieced together, there was an accident at one of Maddox's mines. A collapse. 7 children died, all from the same family, the Rileys. They were immigrants, coal miners. Story goes that Maddox offered them housing on his land as part of their employment. 7 children. I repeated, thinking of the 7 crosses. Dr. Harrison nodded. The official record says they were buried in the town cemetery, but there were always rumors that Maddox had them buried on his property instead. Some kind of guilt or penance, perhaps. Driving back to the house, my mind raced. 7 children dead in a mining accident. 7 crosses at my property's edge. It couldn't be coincidence. Arriving home in late afternoon, the house looked different somehow. Darker, more forbidding. Approaching the front door, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small symbol carved into the door frame wood. A circle with a line through it, weathered with age but still visible. Inside, the house was unnaturally cold despite the warm September day. Building a fire in the library, I continued my research, spreading out journals, notes from Dr. Harrison, and property documents. One thing kept nagging at me: December 21st, 1887, the date Edmund Maddox had marked with, "It is done, God forgive us," and Richard Maddox's entry from the same date in 1971 calling it the anniversary of the original sin. What had happened that date? Opening my laptop, using spotty cell signal as a hotspot, I searched for news archives from December 1887. After some digging, I found a digitized local newspaper from December 23, 1887. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes, 7 children lost in mine collapse." According to the article, the collapse occurred on December 21st. The Riley children had been bringing their father dinner at the mine when the tunnel gave way. The bodies were never recovered. The article stated, as further attempts at excavation were deemed too dangerous. But something else appeared. A small paragraph near the end that made my blood run cold. Rumors of unsafe conditions at the Maddox Coal and Iron Company's mines have persisted for months, with workers claiming proper support beams were not installed to save costs. Mr. Edmund Maddox, owner of the mine, has denied these allegations and expressed his deep condolences to the bereaved parents. He has offered to cover all funeral expenses and provide ongoing financial support. Financial support. Payments. Was this the beginning of the arrangement mentioned in journals? But why had payments continued for almost a century after the accident? And what did Richard Maddox mean writing that money was never the real currency in this exchange? That night was the worst yet. House temperature dropped near freezing despite my fire and heating efforts. Noises were constant. Footsteps, knocking, scratching at walls and windows. Several times I heard children's voices, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes speaking words I couldn't quite make out. Around midnight, all lights simultaneously went out. Fumbling for my phone flashlight, I found it dead despite being fully charged earlier. In pitch darkness, I heard a new sound. Soft, rhythmic thumping from the kitchen direction. Grabbing a candle I'd left in the library, I lit it with shaking hands and made my way toward the noise. The kitchen was empty, but the back door stood open, swinging gently in the breeze. The thumping source. I was certain I'd locked it earlier. Moving to close it, I saw something outside that made me freeze. 7 small figures standing at the wood's edge, barely visible in moonlight. They appeared childlike, but something was wrong with their proportions, with how unnaturally still they stood. One raised a hand, beckoning. Without thinking, I slammed the door shut and locked it, then ran through the house, checking every door and window, securing them all. I ended up back in the library, stoking the fire to roaring blaze and huddling close, the only warmth and light source. I must have dozed off, because I woke with a start to early morning sunlight streaming through windows. The fire had burned to embers, but the house was warm again. Electricity was back. My phone, when checked, showed full battery. Had I dreamed the whole thing? But the back door was still unlocked, standing slightly ajar. And on the kitchen floor were 7 sets of small muddy footprints leading from door to room center, where they formed a circle. I couldn't stay in that house any longer, not without answers. Packing an overnight bag, I drove back into town, checking into the small bed and breakfast on the square. From there, I called Philip Jenkins, the attorney who'd handled the sale. To my surprise, he agreed to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop in the town square. Jenkins looked even more nervous than I remembered, his thin face pinched with anxiety as he slid into the booth across from me. Before I could speak, he held up a hand. Before you say anything, Mr. Chen, I should remind you that you signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding any personal items or documents found on the Maddox property. I'm not here to discuss that. I lied. I'm having some unusual experiences at the house. I thought you might put me in touch with previous owners. The Maddox heirs who sold me the property. Perhaps they could provide context about the house's quirks. Jenkins shook his head firmly. That won't be possible. The heirs were very clear they wanted no further contact regarding the property. The sale is final, and they've moved on. Moved on from what exactly? I pressed. What are they trying to forget? His eyes widened slightly as he began gathering his things. I don't know what you're talking about. Our business is concluded, Mr. Chen. I wish you the best of luck with your new home. As he stood to leave, I played my last card. I know about the Riley children, I said quietly. I know about the mine accident on December 21st, 1887. I know about the arrangement with Samuel Langford. Jenkins froze halfway out of his seat. For a moment, he looked genuinely terrified. Then he leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. Listen to me carefully. Leave that house. Sell it. Abandon it. Burn it to the ground. I don't care. But don't spend another night there. The arrangement is broken. The boundary is failing. They can't be contained anymore. With that, he hurried out, leaving me staring after him in shock. That night in my bed and breakfast room, I spread out all collected information, trying to make sense. The mining accident. The 7 Riley children. The mysterious arrangement with the Langford family continuing for decades. The supposedly failing boundary. What kind of boundary contained what? I remembered the crosses at Wood's Edge and the strange symbol carved into my front door frame. Were these boundary parts? Some protection or barrier, and the locked attic room. What was it meant to contain or conceal? I needed to go back one more time, needed to understand what was happening before deciding next steps. Next morning, I returned to the property, in clear daylight with birds singing and gentle breeze rustling leaves. The previous night's terrors seemed hard to believe. The house looked almost welcoming. Weathered facade glowing warmly in morning sun, I decided to start my investigation at the family crypt in the woods. This time, I came prepared with heavy-duty flashlight and tools to open the rusted gate. The forest was peaceful following the faint path to the clearing. The stone mausoleum stood as I remembered, but something felt different about the atmosphere. Heavier, more watchful. With effort, I broke the rusted chain securing the gate. It swung open with a mournful creak, revealing dark interior. My flashlight beam cut through gloom, illuminating a small stone-walled chamber. Center sat a large stone sarcophagus. Along walls were 7 smaller markers, niches or drawers like those in a columbarium, each labeled with name and 2 dates: 1887 Sarah Riley, 1877 1887 James Riley, 1878 1887 O'Reilly, 1880 1887 Emma Riley, 1882 1887 Abigail Riley, 1884 1887 Thomas Riley, 1886 1887 The Riley children. But according to newspaper article, their bodies had never been recovered from the mine collapse. So what was interred here? The large central sarcophagus bore no name, only a date: December 21st, 1887, and carved into its stone lid was the same symbol from my door frame, a circle with a line through it. Placing my hand on the lid, I immediately withdrew it. The stone was ice cold, much colder than it should have been on a warm September day. Stepping back, my foot hit something on the floor. A small leather-bound book placed at the sarcophagus foot. Picking it up revealed another journal, but not one I'd seen before. The name inscribed inside was Samuel W. Langford. Sitting on a fallen log just outside the crypt, I began reading. Samuel Langford's journal painted a very different picture than newspaper articles or even Maddox's family journals. According to Langford, the mine collapse was no accident. Edmund Maddox had indeed cut corners on safety measures, ignoring repeated engineer warnings. But the tragedy went deeper than negligence. Langford wrote that Maddox had been excavating in an area local indigenous people warned was cursed or sacred. The miners had broken through into a natural cavern containing ancient artifacts and what appeared to be ceremonial remains. Most workers refused to continue digging there, citing strange noises, unexplained accidents, and pervasive dread. Maddox, dismissing these concerns as superstition, brought in the Riley family. Recent immigrants desperate for work, unaware of local taboos. Patrick Riley and his oldest son took day shift. Younger children sometimes brought meals or helped with small tasks. On December 21st, 1887, all 7 younger Riley children were in the mine when collapse occurred. According to Langford's account, witnesses reported just before cave-in, the children had gathered around something they'd found. Something glowing with unnatural light. The collapse sealed children in an unreachable mine section. For 3 days, rescuers reported hearing children's voices behind rock walls, sometimes crying, sometimes singing, sometimes speaking in languages no one recognized. Then on December 24th night, something emerged from the sealed mine. Not the children, Langford wrote, but something wearing their forms. Edmund Maddox, driven by guilt or fear or both, made what Langford called a pact with forces beyond mortal understanding. With Langford's help, knowledgeable in certain occult matters, Maddox constructed a boundary around part of his property, a barrier meant to contain whatever had emerged from the mine. The arrangement was complex. The entities would be allowed to remain on a portion of Maddox's land, contained by the boundary. In return, they would not seek vengeance against the Maddox family or spread beyond the property. Certain payments and observances were required to maintain this boundary. Rituals performed on specific dates. Offerings left at designated locations. Langford's final journal entry, dated January 1st, 1888, was chilling. The barrier holds, but it is not perfect. They test it constantly. They remember what they once were, but they are no longer those children. What emerged from the depths of the earth is ancient and patient. They will wait a year, a decade, a century. Time means nothing to them. They will wait for the barrier to fail, for the arrangement to be forgotten, and then they will spread. I closed the journal, hands shaking. Madness, of course. A fantastic story born from guilt and grief and another era's superstitions. Except I had seen small figures at wood's edge. I had heard children's voices, their footsteps in my house. I had seen their footprints on my kitchen floor. Standing to leave the crypt, I noticed something missed before. A small alcove behind the sarcophagus containing what appeared to be artifacts. A stone bowl, darkly stained. Several candles made of strange translucent wax. A knife with ornately carved bone handle. Ritual implements, perhaps, for maintaining Langford's described arrangement. I left everything as found and made my way back to the house. Langford's journal tucked under my arm. I needed to get back to the attic, find any information about specific rituals or requirements for maintaining the boundary. But emerging from the woods, I saw something wrong. The 7 crosses that had stood at forest edge were gone. Only splintered wood remained, as if violently torn from ground. And the symbol carved into my front door frame, the circle with line, had been scratched out, deep grooves in the wood obliterating the design. I rushed inside and up to the attic room where I'd found family journals. Needed any information about maintaining boundary, about Langford's mentioned rituals. But the room was empty. Shelves that held dozens of journals stood bare. All that remained was a single paper piece on the floor, a page torn from one journal. On it, in handwriting I recognized as Richard Maddox's, were instructions for a ritual to be performed on winter solstice, December 21st. Today was September 17th. I had 3 months to figure out how to restore the boundary, reinstate the arrangement that had contained whatever emerged from that mine for over a century. That night, I didn't even attempt sleeping in the house. Gathering essentials, I drove back to town's bed and breakfast. The elderly woman running it looked concerned when I requested another night, but didn't ask questions. In the small room's safety, I pored over the torn page in Langford's journal, trying to piece together what I'd need to do. The described ritual was complex, specific herbs and substances, precise timing based on star positions, incantations in unfamiliar language. I would need help, someone knowledgeable about such matters. But who? Over next few days, I divided time between researching occult practices online and trying to track down anyone with knowledge about the specific ritual. I stayed at bed and breakfast, returning to house only during daylight to check on things. Each visit, the house felt different. Colder, darker, more oppressive. Twice I found small footprints in dust, once a child's handprint on a window, though no child had been there. After a week of dead ends, I remembered something Dr. Harrison had said. The Langford family law firm had closed in early 1970s. But that didn't necessarily mean no Langfords remained. Perhaps one of Samuel's descendants would have information about the arrangement. A visit to county records yielded a promising lead. The Langford family law firm had indeed closed in 1972, but the last partner had been Eliza Langford, Samuel's great-granddaughter. According to records, she was still alive, residing in a nursing home about 30 miles away. Next day, I drove to Sunny Pines Retirement Community, a pleasant complex surrounded by manicured gardens, explaining to receptionist that I was researching local history and hoped to speak with Miss Langford about her family's law practice. I was directed to a sunroom where a small bird-like woman sat in wheelchair gazing out at gardens. Eliza Langford was 92, according to introducing nurse, but mind still sharp. Pale blue eyes assessed me with keen intelligence as I sat beside her. "Mems Langford," I began. "I'm researching Maddox family history and their property. I understand your family's law firm represented them for many years." She studied me a long moment before speaking. "You're living in the house, aren't you? I can see it on you." I was taken aback. "Yes, I recently purchased it." "How did you know?" She smiled thinly. "There's a shadow about you. A coolness. Like you're carrying a piece of that place with you." She leaned forward. "Why have you come? What do you want from me?" I decided on directness. I found Samuel Langford's journal. I know about the arrangement, about the boundary. I know what happened to the Riley children. Eliz's face drained of color. She gripped wheelchair arms, so tightly knuckles turned white. "You shouldn't speak of such things," she whispered. "Names have power. Memories have power. The boundary is failing," I said quietly. "The crosses have been destroyed. The door symbol has been scratched out. I found a page describing a ritual, but I don't know how to perform it correctly. I need your help." She closed her eyes briefly as if in pain. "We tried to maintain it for generations. My father, my grandfather, all the way back to Samuel. But it became harder each year. The payments increased. The requirements grew more demanding." "What kind of payments?" I asked, though fearing I already knew. "Blood at first," she said, matter of factly. "Just a few drops from a willing donor. Then more, always more. By my father's time, they wanted sacrifices, animals, and they spoke to us in dreams. Showed us things, promised things." She shuddered. "When they began asking for children, I ended it. Dissolved the firm, broke the contract and the Maddox family. I warned Richard, told him to destroy the house, salt the earth, but he wouldn't listen. Too proud, too attached to family legacy. He fled instead, hoping distance would protect him." She laughed bitterly. "A's if anything could." "Miss Langford," I said carefully, "I need to know how to restore the boundary. If these entities are no longer contained, what will happen?" She looked at me with pity. "They will spread slowly at first, taking one child here, another there, assuming their forms, their lives. But they are hungry, and they have waited a long time. Eventually, they will take more. How do I stop them?" She was silent long moment, then sighed. "There is a way, not to banish them. They are too deeply rooted now. But to restore the boundary, contain them once more. However, the price." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Tell me." I insisted. "Please." Eliza Langford reached into cardigan pocket and withdrew a small key. "There is a safe deposit box at First National Bank in town. Box 1887. This key opens it. Inside, you'll find everything you need to know. But I warn you, once you start down this path, there's no turning back. You will be bound to that place, to that obligation, just as the Maddox family was." I took the key, thanking her. Standing to leave, she caught my wrist with surprising strength. "Remember," she said, eyes intense, "they are not children. No matter what they look like, no matter what they say or how they cry, they are not the Riley children. Those children died in 1887. What wears their forms is something far older, far more dangerous." The safe deposit box contained a small leather case. Inside were detailed ritual instructions in Samuel Langford's precise hand. A silver dagger with strange, etched symbols, 7 small silver crosses, and a dark liquid veil I didn't examine closely. According to instructions, the ritual had to be performed at midnight on winter solstice. December 21st. The mine collapse and original pact anniversary. The boundary needed re-establishing by placing 7 crosses at specific property points and renewing the doorframe symbol. Most challenging would be the binding element blood, freely given from someone property connected. As current owner, that would be me. Over next 3 months, I divided time between my works, which suffered, property and Maddox family research, yielding little noog, and ritual preparations. I continued staying in town, visiting house only during daylight. Each visit revealed more evidence of entities' growing presence. Children's toys I didn't own appearing in different rooms. Small items going missing, only to be found arranged in strange patterns. Writing on fogged mirrors and windows. Names, dates, fragments of what looked like the same unknown language from ritual instructions. As December 21st approached, manifestations became more aggressive. Twice I arrived to find all furniture in a room overturned. Once, all kitchen knives were embedded in the wall, forming the now familiar symbol, circle with line through it. But most disturbing were the voices. They began calling to me using my name, begging for help, comfort, freedom. Sometimes they sounded like frightened, lost children. Other times, voices were deeper, older, speaking words that hurt my ears and left pounding headaches. On winter solstice night, I arrived at house just before 11 p.m., giving myself an hour preparation. Snow had fallen steadily all day, blanketing property in white. The house loomed dark and silent. No visible lights outside. I had everything needed. Silver Cross's dagger, liquid vial sever now knowing it contained herb and other substance mixture, and Langford's detailed instructions. I'd spent weeks memorizing incantations, practicing precise required movements. Approaching front door, I noticed fresh footprints in snow. Small footprints like children circling the house. 7 distinct sets leading from woods to house and back.